imagine you're a CRO walking before the board and talking to them about your go-to-market strategy. And you get up, the first thing out of your mouth is to say, our competitive strategy is to go out there and lose 85% of the deals. But that's what these leaders are doing. You have to model the behaviors you expect. So managers at all levels, if we expect curiosity, if we expect continuous learning, if we expect discipline and accountability, we have to model those behaviors ourselves. You have to be out and engaged. You can't hide yourself behind a screen. You can't hide yourself behind a set of dashboards. Control what you can control, and don't use what you can't control as your excuse. Because if you use what you can't control as your excuse, you'll never achieve anything. We can continue to do what we have always done, and nothing will change, or we can choose to start in one place.
The recruitment process, David, why is it still so stuck in the dark ages? And, it's sort of dinosaur, it's sort of hothouse effect. It's because recruitment is so crucial to get right, but we don't seem to give it the attention it deserves. Okay, again, we have a lovely bloke, David Brock, who's back. We don't often have guests back here twice on the show, but, this guy's earned it, and it's not that, we're so lucky to have guys like him on the show, guys and girls. If you know David Brock's work, you'll know that he wrote a very best-selling book called Sales Manager Survival Guide, and he's backed it up with this brilliant book, Is Good Enough, which I actually shouted out on LinkedIn. And then David very kindly said, "Oh, that's very kind, Sinj." And I said, "Okay, well, being a sales guy, I'm gonna make an ask. I say, David, will you come back on the show?" And he said, "Yeah." He's been flying all over the place. He's a bit crook, as we say down in here. But David, welcome back.
Well, thank you, Sinjin. It's always a pleasure to be with you. So I really appreciate it.
Now let's get into it, because a lot of people know who you are now by your brilliant books. There's two books. Let me hold them up because I've done my research. There's this one. Was that your first book that you wrote?
Yeah, that came out about 2016.
Okay, cool. So Sales Manager Survival Guide, and we'll put that in the show notes. And this isn't some blatant advertorial because I only get guests on I think that, can really, really help us. And so you wrote that in 2016, Sales Manager Survival Guide. Then this one, Is Good Enough, came out...
December of last year.
December of last year.
2025, yep.
Beautiful. David, my question is, what's changed in your thinking between your first book and your second book, and what's changed that maybe you believe but now don't believe? Because obviously there was a bit of time between the books, and all good books take good time to write. What's changed?
Yeah. Well, I thought so much has changed, but I thought there was something in all of the conversations that was missing. And I've actually been trying to write about this missing element for a number of years. I had committed when I came out with Sales Manager Survival Guide to come out with Sales Executive Survival Guide in about 2020.
You mean in 2000? Interrupting, like they'll level up?
Yes, to go to like the CRO level, CEO level, and kind of look at things more from an overall strategy, culture, all that kind of thing, point of view. And I wrote about 10 versions of it, got 95% away through 10 versions, and it never was quite right. So last year I had a brainstorm. I sat down with Claude and I said, here are all the drafts I've written of this thing before. Help me organize my thinking. And there was all sorts of stuff in there, all sorts of stuff good and bad in the drafts. And it came back and said, there are a whole bunch of things you could write about, but it said the thing I think that's really interesting that nobody's talking about is the behaviors and mindsets. And because I'd written a lot about it in Sales Executive Survival Guide, and in fact, the first 2/3 of that book was going to be that. But then I was adding some other stuff into it, and it kind of got lost in it. And so it came back, and with that, I had the brainstorm. I said, what we tend not to do is say, what are the mindsets, what are the behaviors we see in outstanding organizations? And I started looking around, and some of the quick notes I had was, imagine two salespeople. There's one who's consistently a great performer. And there's one that's consistently a mediocre performer. They work for the same company. They have the same products. Everything's the same, but one is consistently better. And I started saying, what makes those people so much better? Or like I have certain clients where I see one is consistently better. All of them struggle because it's rough stuff, but one is consistently a much higher performer than the others. They all have great products, good reputations, blah, blah, blah. And I said, what makes it different? And it turns out not to be like in the sales case, our business strategies, our products, our technologies, whether we have a good coach or something like that. It turns out to be our mindsets and behaviors.
Yeah. Can we unpack this word mindset? Because it's a word that gets trotted around. It might mean different things to other people. Can we go deeper on there's the high performer, and then there's the average or the mediocre performer, and you believe that mindset separates the two. Could we unpack that more? What does that mean? What does that look like?
So just for some clarification, I use the term mindsets and behaviors. What I use them interchangeably. Mindset is kind of who you are and what's in you. The behavior is how you demonstrate that every day. So if I had a mindset around curiosity, but I didn't display it in anything I did, my behavior would be inconsistent. And also really what I do is I just say the behavior is the outward display of the mindset. The mindset is kind of really what makes you you. Who you are as a human being, kind of what you value, how you want to be, present yourself to the rest of the world, and kind of how you work. And so in this, I identified roughly 8 different mindsets and behaviors, and people could argue that there's some different ones, but the ones I chose for this book kind of started out with, there's a through line. There are 2 behaviors, mindsets and behaviors that kind of impact all the others, or kind of run under all the others. One is caring, and that's caring about yourself, caring about your peers, your organization, and your customers. And then the other one that's kind of a through line is purpose. What's my purpose? What am I trying to achieve in either the work I do as an individual? What do I want to stand for? Or as an organization, what do we want to stand for to our customers, to our people, to our shareholders, or that kind of thing? So those are 2 mindsets and behaviors that kind of impact all the others. Then the rest of them were curiosity, continued learning, customer centricity, the ability to deal with change and ambiguity, then accountability and discipline.
All right. Can we pick a couple of those? Is that all right, sir?
Absolutely.
Can we talk about this caring, this self-care? Again, trotted around, very popular on social media, self-care. I always, when I start my conferences or when I get privileged to speak on stage, or talk to audiences or teams, I say, what's the most important part of the sales process? And they always say it's the product or the customer. They never say it's themselves. So I think you are in violent agreement on that shared philosophy. Yeah. This caring thing, tell me more about that. Like, what is it? Because it's so crucial. It's crucial.
So it's caring is really, it first starts, I kind of started selfishly. It's caring about yourself. And caring that you're doing the best that you can possibly can. You're achieving your purpose, but you're doing the best that you can, and you care enough to do that, and not just sit idly by. So if you don't care for yourself, it's not going to be. You won't be able to care for anybody else. And I don't mean it in the selfish kind of way, because the other elements of caring come in is caring for my customer. If I don't care for them and their success, they're going to know it immediately. If all I care about is my personal success and getting the purchase order, that's why customers are throwing us out of their offices.
And at time of recording here, David, 2026, we've still got that mindset.
Exactly.
And they wonder why they fail, because they're not self-aware.
Well, we see all this data. We see all this data around, customers don't want to see salespeople anymore. And that's because we don't, we go out and say, all we care about is our purchase order. We don't care about you at all. And so it doesn't work that way. So caring from that sense, our business is so difficult that if we didn't care for our peers' success and our organization's success, because we need them behind us to be successful with our customers. So caring has all these dimensions. It's not a selfish kind of thing, but it says, is I care about achieving something, or I care about helping my customer achieve something, or my organization achieve something. And by doing that consistently, I can outperform everybody else. And what I've seen, in the beginning of the book, I talk about, I've seen so many organizations settled for mediocrity and not achieve their full potential. And so caring is really about whatever my full potential is. It may be here or it may be here, but whatever my full potential is, I care enough to achieve my full potential.
Why is it that maybe there's so many levels we can attack this, but there's companies that don't care enough, don't care about their sales team enough because they can never find budget to train them or get good coaching or help their managers, and they're married to mediocrity, or for want of better words, and they're myopic and they don't care, and they don't understand the consequences of not caring, and they probably haven't calculated that, because again, it sounds sort of nebulous, caring. Oh yeah, David St. John, we get it. We do care. And they pay such lip service to it, but they don't understand that. Well, I'm just going to say with AI, and I know we'll get into that again, like we did last time, is people know if you genuinely care or not.
Exactly. I mean, they get it immediately if you care or not, whether it's within your organization and you don't care. They see that, and customers immediately say, if all I'm in it for is a commission check and all, they you can't build trust and all, and they recognize that you don't care. So I think there are a couple of dimensions to it. One is I think, in the business world, in probably the last 10, 15 years, we've seen it increasingly mechanized and increasingly depersonalized. So our customers are widgets that go along our assembly line. They go from an SDR to an AE. We go to a demo. We go someplace else, and they go to some customer service person and puts an order. So a customer is just a widget that goes down the assembly line. And salespeople and SDRs and all the others are just widgets that stand along the assembly line. And we have this kind of disposal mentality, is we can replace them. And we've seen this in the last year, 2 years with AI. We've seen AI enabling us to hire less experienced salespeople and supplement them with AI. Or in so many cases, AI is taking over the jobs, so we don't even need people for it. So it's really this whole, part of it is this whole kind of what I'll call this dehumanization or depersonalization of business, saying we can look at it very mechanistically and run it kind of like a machine. So I think that's one. I think the other thing is where I see people struggle with this the most is people who are making their numbers, maybe just barely making the numbers, but they're making the numbers. So they say, we're hitting our revenue goals, we're hitting our growth goals and all that kind of thing. But then you look under the covers and you see, well, fewer than 35% of your people are making plan. Your win rates are 15 to 20%. You have turnover of 11 to 18 months. So making your numbers means that you could be achieving much more. If you look at my win rates, 15 to 20%, with the same amount of work, I'm competing. I wrote an article a few months ago that said, imagine you're a CRO walking before the board and talking to them about your go-to-market strategy. And you get up, the first thing out of your mouth is to say, our competitive strategy, what's going to cause us to make the numbers, is to go out there and lose 85% of the deals. And so
I love
you
how
can
you
imagine what
those numbers. Yeah.
yeah, so you can imagine what the board will say about this, but that's what these leaders are doing by accepting 15 to 20% win rates. So you say, they're settling for mediocrity. They could easily be much better and raise the win rate to 30% or 40%, something like that, with no incremental cost, with no incremental effort. You're doubling your revenue. But see, the people I see, most not realizing they've settled for mediocrity are the organizations that are hitting their number most of the time.
I love how you reframe
this other data.
I love how you reframe that. Say win rate of 15%, and then you actually go to the board of CRO and you say, are we happy with celebrating an 85% loss rate?
Right.
Like 85% of deals not going through. That's absolutely, I do all that. Next question then would be, where does this, you said that it should start with the individual. Sometimes those individuals maybe aren't self-aware enough. Something's happened to them in their life, their environment, their family, the way they've been brought up, parenting, socialization, all those things. Where does or where should care start in order to foster this thing that we're talking about?
So I think a lot of these, we're all as human beings born with certain levels of these kinds of base things. We're born with kind of caring. We're born with curiosity and learning and things like that. To a large degree, it's trained out of us. I was talking to somebody the other day about curiosity, and I said, "Do you hang around 4, 5, 6-year-olds very much? I mean, they just drive you crazy with the questions that they're asking." And those were all of us back a number of years ago, and we've trained that out of them. So I think everybody has a certain innate amount. It could be higher, it could be low, but I think what we can do organizationally is we can nurture and we can develop it. So we can take people who've been curious but kind of forgotten how to do that. We can kind of introduce it into them in programs and how we train them and how we teach them to think, say in coaching. I, for a number of years, have run this program for a very, very large semiconductor company. And it's a 2-week program. The salespeople go through it every year. We update it. But the first 3 days are always on curiosity.
I agree. I love it because, David, I say this to my students, my own rural students, whether they're managers or their reps, is I say curiosity is just like the layman's term for psychology. And curious people ask really good questions. And and I know that curiosity is a sales superpower. And curiosity fuels great conversations. And, the education system, without sounding like a TED talk from Sir Keith Robinson, or Ken Robinson, I should say, the late Ken Robinson, which is, one of the all-time TED talks, we kind of metaphorically beat out this curiosity out of our children. And then, so how do sales leaders then rekindle curiosity and coach curiosity to the reps? Is it something they're innately born with, the rep, or can they coach this to them? Because I'm the same.
Yeah, so I think we're innately born with it, but we can develop it to be much, much richer. So you look at, the way a sales manager or somebody in enablement can train that is to be curious themselves. To be curious. If I'm talking to a salesperson, why are you making the assessments you are about this deal? What would happen if you started changing it? So those are questions that get the salesperson to think. And also you're asking them to start thinking and figuring things out and those kinds of things. But because the questions you're asking them and the genuine curiosity that you have in what are their ideas for doing this? If you're an incurious sales manager, what you're going to do is you're going to tell that individual what to do and not let them figure it out themselves. So that's, if our managers aren't curious, they aren't going to get the best out of their people. and those kinds of things. And then curiosity drives, you'll see my cat sitting here on the desk.
I was going to say curiosity killed the cat, but I just couldn't.
Curiosity, yeah. No, he's sitting here being very healthy and very curious. But you see these other things that, I tie it to other things. Continuous learning. People who are curious are continually trying to learn. I see high performers watching other high performers. I see them going to seminars. I see them reading books. Mediocre performers don't read, or they buy the book to be on their shelves, but they don't read it. And they don't underline it or put yellow stickies in. They don't even
apply it. They don't use or apply it. Like, there's such wisdom in these wonderful books that you've written.
Or like you turning over the corners of pages on books and things like that. So that's that curiosity drives that continuous learning. Curiosity drives that customer centricity. And then if we look at kind of ambiguity and complexity, curiosity enables you to figure things out. So we can never train everybody in how to handle every single situation. But if I have these characteristics in these behaviors, I can figure out myself, and I'm driven to do that because of my discipline, because of my accountability, and those kinds of things. So you can start seeing how all these things are tying together.
So how do we, how you talked about behavior is really an outcome of the mindset that drives it. Yep. How do we as practitioners help managers and executives coach and train and foster curiosity in their managers? Because obviously we get the manager right, the team goes right. And what's the impediments there? Because I imagine, what are we got to do? What's got to change? Because ultimately, if we don't change it, they will stay in mediocrity and they will not rise to the full potential that we know, you and I know they're all capable of.
So there are a couple of things. One is you recruit and hire for it. And I was last week while I was back east, I was in some meetings with some, actually 2 different startup companies looking to say, how do we develop some tools to test curiosity, to test these behaviors so that people can recruit and hire for it? So you have to have a good starting point. If you have somebody that is, for instance, uncoachable, incurious, that has a closed mindset, you're never going to change that person. You probably should never hire that person. So 1, you recruit and develop for it. Then 2, now that you start having this culture of things, is managers have to set the example. In the book, what I talk about all the time is you have to model the behaviors you expect. So managers at all levels, if we expect curiosity, if we expect continuous learning, if we expect discipline and accountability, we have to model those behaviors ourselves. So we as leaders can't blame the product side of the company. We can't blame, our pricing. We can't blame other things. We have to accept accountability for that. I talk to people about when I first started selling, I was at IBM, and it was in the heydays of IBM, and we had not great products. There were better products out there, and we always had the most expensive products. But I was still having to make my quotas. And also I couldn't use as an excuse, we have mediocre products and we have expensive products, that's why I'm not making my number. When I joined up, I knew this was the way things were, so I had to figure out how to win in spite of those things. And that's what we see when we see managers displaying the behavior and when we see other people displaying the behavior. I think the 2 things like curiosity, critical thinking, customer centricity, ambiguity will get you along the path. What keeps you on that path is discipline and the accountability. That is I have the discipline to keep executing this, to keep doing the right things time after time after time and figure out how to get better at it. And I'm accountable, is I have nobody to blame except myself.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's so true, but I think sometimes people maybe won't force that reflection. But I want to ask another question, David, because you talked around recruiting and hiring for curiosity and the tools you're using. Can you share what you were able to? What are some of the things? Are there questions you're using, or psychometric tests, or live briefs, or evidential-based questions? What are some of the tools that you're using?
There are a number. I don't set on any one of them, but a lot of them is you see there are a lot of tests you can do. And these two organizations I was looking at are developing some AI tools that help assess that. So those are interesting. But just in kind of the interviews that you have, you look at things like how much does somebody drive the interview? How creative are they? What are they doing in terms of asking questions about how things work? What are they doing about figuring out whether this is the right organization for them? What are they doing to try and figure me out as an interviewer and what I'm looking for and that kind of thing? So I look at those things inherently. I don't look at somebody that comes and doesn't ask many questions. The only question that they talk about how many clubs they've made, how many times they beat quota, and all those kinds of things. And the only question they ask you is, what's the comp plan? And
it's a dead giveaway. I cannot tell you, my friend, how often I'm not a recruiter, but I will help vet some of my raw sales managers or reps as part of the service. And I go to them, so what questions do you have for me? I don't say, have you got any questions? I say, what questions have you got for me? And it's a moment of truth. And I love what you said around, for the listeners, just to reinforce that, how much are they driving the interview? And how much are they leaning in? How much are they asking me questions that go, gee, that's a good question. Hadn't considered, and that critical thinking, that curiosity, and that all the things that we've spoken about. But you get really disappointed because you go, and they go, no, I haven't got any questions. So tell me about the comp plan. And you're just so disappointed. But when someone, there's so many parallels between this and sales conversations with a prospect. When you ask a prospect a really good question. Now, I just want to share one, Dave. It might be useful or not. The question I love asking when it comes to self-awareness, which I think is a huge part of sales success, is I'd say to you, David, hypothetically, we're not role playing here. David, how would colleagues describe you if we were to talk to them? And then David, not this David, would say, oh yeah, well, I'm a hard driver. I work really, really hard. I get on well with people and I've made quota and da. And then I'm waiting, David. And you know what I'm waiting for? I'm waiting for them to say, but here are the things that I know in my work-ons. These are the things exactly. I've got some blind spots and I'm biases and I'm working on those. And this is where, and when I see that, I applaud them and go, I've got someone who's super self-aware. And so, please go.
That self-awareness is kind of that accountability is that I recognize that there's some things I'm not so good at that I need to improve. So you see how they're guiding the conversation, how engaged they are, how they answer your questions, how they ask you questions, how they challenge you. And they take ownership for things that, here's some weaknesses that I have. I need to develop them. Part of what I look for in this organization is how can you help me develop those things?
And I love how you've done that there is, how as an organization can you support me to develop me and coach me on those areas of development? Beautiful. Because
as an interviewee, I want to, if you're recruiting me, I want to know that you care about me, not just as a widget that you have to fill an empty chair, but that you care about me to be successful in the job, that you're going to do the right kind of onboarding and all that kind of thing. And I want to see that you care about me to develop me in that role so I can go into more advanced roles in your organization.
Yeah, I love that. It's such a moment of truth, that conversation, whether it's between a prospect and a rep or a potential employee with an employer. And the recruitment process, David, why is it still so stuck in the dark ages? And, it's sort of dinosaur, it's sort of hothouse effect. It's because recruitment is so crucial to get right, but we don't seem to give it the attention it deserves.
It's probably almost 100% of the time I find even very, very good managers don't take it as seriously as they should. They have the standard job description that they've always used. And so I always say, well, other than the job description, what are you really looking for? How do you know when you're going to find the ideal candidate? What are the characteristics? What are the behaviors? What are the values? What are the kinds of things that you're looking for outside the fact that they made club 10 times, that, they've been in similar industries and all that kind of thing, is how do you know that this is the right person you're going to have? And, people pause and they can't really say it. And I say, I'm not leaving this room until you say it and until it's written down, because now you have to look for those things. But people
and there's
don't do
accountability.
that. Yeah, and they revert back to the standard job descriptions. And I can't tell you, I had a few weeks ago an argument with somebody in HR who was, I was telling the CROs, you need to change your recruiting techniques. And somebody in HR called me up and said, you can't do this. We have a standard. and I said, what we're trying to do is recruit the right people. And your standard doesn't include some questions and some things that we need to look at to make sure they're the right people. And after they thought I was coming in and say, throw away their stuff, I said, and we started talking, they said, oh, I get it. That's really reasonable. And they helped kind of reconstruct how we do the process.
Well done. So they didn't want to deviate because they want to obviously have the comparison between candidates, and you can't compare one. If you ask this question, you didn't. It's interesting, because if you're serious sales talent, what you have to understand is that it is a sales interview between two people. It's not just I've got all the gold here, I choose you. It's not master slave. It's like, actually, I'm choosing you, and I'm trying to work out if you're good for me, not just that you think I'm good for you.
Yeah, we're choosing each other, and I think too many on each side. I think we forget it. Well, as managers, we're choosing the person, but I think people who are being recruited should say, I'm choosing this, whether I want to work for this company and this manager. And you see, a lot the data, the engagement data, and all the surveys is the number one reason people leave organizations is their manager, their direct manager.
100%.
And so, so as we're looking for a new job, we have to go into that consciously, and the manager has to sell himself, herself and the company to the recruit, and the recruit has to make an assessment based on what they've heard in the way it's presented. And likewise, the recruit has to sell himself or herself to the company to make sure that there's a good fit there.
Yeah. It's this is such a good list. We talked about caring. We've touched on accountability and discipline. I asterisk that one because there are so many organizations that lack accountability. There's no clarity on what success is like, what does good look like. And then they moan and groan and wonder why, or maybe they don't. Maybe they just muddle on your title of the book here, David, is Good Enough, Good Enough.
Yeah.
What was the motive for writing this book? Like, because you obviously saw a gap around the coupling of mindset and behavior, and the title is Good Enough, Good Enough. Where did this all come from?
Well, again, I think it came from, over the years, I've seen this increasing, and it sounds strange saying it this way, this increasing commitment to mediocrity, or this increasing commitment to do just good enough. And I started saying, is good enough good enough? And so when we see, again, earlier we talked about the declining win rates, the declining percent of people making quota, declining companies making their goals and that kind of thing. And people are going by. You see whole categories of industry. You see the SaaS industry, for instance, just imploding really right now because they've accepted, despite all their growth and all their supposed success, they actually could have been much better than they were, and they've accepted this lower level of performance for it. And again, it's like, why in the world do you accept 15% win rates? Why in the world do you accept 35% of your people making goal? why in the world do you expect to spend money recruiting somebody, onboarding them, and getting them out to build pipeline, only to have them go in 11 months?
Yeah, it's crazy.
But those have become standards across so much of the industry. And so again, you start saying you can perform at such a much higher rate. I tell this story every once in a while. It's a very big professional services company, about a $20 billion company. And the board had asked me to come in and do a quick assessment. They said, we plan to grow up to be about 25 billion in this time period. What changes do we need to make? And this is primarily on the go-to-market and on the business strategy side, not on the delivery side, to be able to achieve that number. And I went through, did some analysis, and I said, it's a slam dunk. In a few years, I'll make 25 billion. There are a few things I tinker with. I gave them a few little things and all that. And then they were smiling and congratulating themselves. And my last line was, but I'm sure glad I'm not a shareholder. And that stopped them. And they said, why would you say that after you said everything? And I said, well, really, you should be aiming for 35 billion. And they said, how can you say that? And I said, well, when I started this, you said you were very good at selling over $1 million deals. But your average transaction value is 52,000. Your median transaction value is 27,000. Your win rate on deals over $1 million is 9%. And when I started showing them this data, and again, they were caught up like everybody else is they were making the, quarterly revenue numbers and that kind of thing. And they thought they were doing very, very well. But when I started showing them that data, they said, now I get it. We should be so much better. And so then the conversation shifted and they said, what are the things we need to change to start achieving our full potential? And we laid out kind of a roadmap, to start kind of a crawl, walk, run kind of thing of here are the first couple of things that you can do. And once you achieve success, you do the next couple and so on. And right now, that was several years ago. Right now, they're on the path to doing that. So
amazing.
But you see it in all sorts of organizations.
Well done for having that conversation with them and getting to raise their sights higher, because, I feel like we let ourselves off the hook. The big theme of the book is around excuses. Yeah. And I'm actually to my folded page of page 77, where you talk about sales leaders creating accountable teams. And one of the things you say here is stop accepting excuses. Now, when someone offers an excuse, you give them a redirection question, don't you?
Yeah.
And you can remember the redirection question. And you say, I understand those challenges exist. Set those aside for a moment. What could you have done differently? What I love about that is it puts the onus of responsibility back on the person. You're not telling, you're asking, and you're empowering them to search within them and surface some understanding and raise some comprehension about, okay, we understand those challenges exist. If we part those for a minute, what could you have done differently? That is a beautiful coaching question.
But see, that's what I learned in being a young salesperson at IBM. I knew that our products were probably at least 50% price higher than everybody else's, sometimes 100%. I knew they weren't the sexiest products out there. So I had to set those two things aside and say, how do I win the business in spite of that? Exactly. I couldn't use those as an excuse because everybody else was, I had all these peers out there who were making their quotas with the same circumstances. So I had to say, how do I figure out, set those things aside? I couldn't control those, but I looked at the things that I could control and the things that I could change.
100%.
That would cause them to do business with me, and things like being trustworthy, things of being very customer-centric, focusing on their business and focusing on their success, where some of my cheaper rivals and secular rivals were coming in saying, we're cheaper, faster, better. And all I said is, I'm more expensive, probably slower, but here's what you care about in your business. And here's what we're going to do to help you with that business. So I put those things that I couldn't control out of my mind. And that's what I see all the time is control what you can control and don't use what you can't control as your excuse. Because if you use what you can't control as your excuse, you'll never achieve anything.
Oh, so well said. This illusion of competence, David, that you mentioned in the book, the illusion of competence. Why is it that so many businesses or managers or even reps engage in that? What's going on?
I think it's kind of something is we see reinforcing behaviors around us within the company. So we get this illusion of we're kind of right there in the center of what everybody else is doing. Whatever they're doing right, we're doing right. Whatever they're doing wrong, we're doing wrong. We extend that to other companies and markets in the industry, and SaaS is a great one, is everybody is doing exactly the same thing, and everybody's now starting to fail miserably because they were doing exactly the same thing, and they were building this illusion of competence that we're growing just like our competitors are growing, we're growing like everybody else, we may be growing faster. That doesn't mean we're being as competent as we could. And again, like if you look at across the SaaS business right now, win rates, last I heard, some people are saying they're 11 to 15%. And you look at kind of any kind of program that we have in sales. You look at outreach programs. I say, how many 100 emails do I have to send, or how many dials do I have to have? And thank goodness I have AI these days, because now I can do 10,000 customized emails in 15 minutes, but I still am not going to raise my performance.
It's just going to multiply, for want of better language, crap.
Yeah.
It's just if you're doing something wrong, AI is just going to multiply and accelerate the wrongness of that and burn so many leads. David, why is it that businesses don't understand the very pragmatic nature of what you're saying here, which is good enough, and why are you sometimes celebrating mediocrity or defending mediocrity? Because it requires a different mindset from the leaders of the business, because obviously the managers reporting to the leaders, the VPOs, the CROs, the board, the CEO, whatever it happens to be. But it seems to me, correct me if I'm wrong, it's a rare mindset.
It is a rare thing, because so one thing I'll say is watching the mindsets, coaching and developing people for all these different behaviors is much tougher work than it's easy for us to look at, do we have the training programs? Do we have all the technology platforms? Do we have the outbound programs? Do we have the organization structure? Do we have the right metrics? Those things are easy to do and easy to hide behind. But with the behaviors is we as managers have to be out there engaged with our people. We can't be passive. We can't sit and look at a dashboard. What kind of dashboard is going to tell me I'm a 5 on a scale of 10 on curiosity? I'm a 2 on a scale of 10 on customer centricity. What kind of dashboard is going to tell me that? No dashboard is going to measure that. So you have to be out there with your people observing them. So I think the reason so many people shy away from this, even though intellectually they get it, is this is tough work. You have to be out and engaged. You can't hide yourself behind a screen. You can't hide yourself behind a set of dashboards. You can't call somebody in your office and say, you need to get your prospecting up. Your pipeline is bad. You need to 3x your pipeline. Those are the mechanical things that are very easy for people to do. And so when we're uncomfortable dealing with the people, and kind of the messiness of it, we default to the easy side. And those are what I call the mechanisms, the processes, the programs, the metrics, all those organizational structures and all those kinds of things. So we default to easy. We have to do those things, but the tough stuff, the really tough stuff is the behaviors. And again, we started this with, if I have two sellers and they have exactly the same mechanisms, the products, the programs, the technology, and all that kind of thing, how come one consistently performs much better than the other? And that's the mindsets and behaviors. And that's the real tough stuff. And it means as a manager, you have to be somewhat vulnerable about that. That you're sitting down there and watching, people go through trials, tribulations, watching people screw up really badly, watching people who may not be in the right job, and helping them understand why they aren't in the right job and moving them to the right thing. That's tough work.
Yeah. It's interesting. There's hard work. This culture of accountability and higher standards and all these things that are involved with achieving those things, they are hard work, but are they as hard work as actually not enjoying a 91% win rate and losing 91% of your deals, or losing 37% of your, only 2/3 of your sales force are not achieving target? That sounds to me like hard work, but human's nature is the path of least resistance, like water, right? Like we avoid the hard things, doing the hard work. And I always say, someone much smarter than me, again, that would not be hard to find, the soft stuff is the hardest stuff. And
that's exactly it.
The hardest stuff.
The soft stuff is the hardest stuff because, again, I wrote a blog post, I think last Friday, about you can't measure that. So where's the dashboard for me to measure all these different characteristics? Where's the dashboard for me to measure this soft stuff? There isn't. You have to get out there and do it. I think the reason so many people default to the easy side is if you have low accountability, it's easy to blame things on the easy side. It's easy to say, we have the wrong products, we have the wrong prices, we have the wrong org structure, we didn't have the right training, we need a bigger tech stack, all those sorts of things. So it's very easy for you to blame those things. And guess what we do is we go out and spend millions of dollars more on those things. And
I agree. And I think I've said this so many times, I had this conversation so many times in the last week, we over-index in product training and we under-index in sales training and particularly manager training. Because again, if we get the manager right, the team goes right. Show me the manager, I'll show you the team. David, could you tell me about this new book that's coming out? The sort of sister. So I just want to say, listen, you hold that up. What's it called? Tell us about it.
This is called the DNA of sales excellence. So if you look, I have the model of DNA, and what I did is I said, I have something I call like the behaviors strand, which is the behaviors that were in is good enough. And I as I started studying more, having those behaviors themselves don't allow you to be excellent. They give you, they're required for excellence, but by themselves, they don't allow you to be excellent. Having the right technology, the right products, the right tools, the right training, the right metrics, the right org structure is also very helpful. So I don't want to discount all of those. So I started thinking those are two strands of DNA. And if you say, what holds those together are these rungs? And so if I'm designing a sales training program, what I want to do is I want to say, what are the two key behaviors that are critical for this program on product training, say, to be really successful? And so I can also look at, I'm putting in place some new metrics. What are the two behaviors that are critical for these metrics to succeed? And in that case, it's probably discipline and accountability. In the product training piece, it might be curiosity and continued learning. In leveraging a technology piece, it might be discipline and execution. In looking at complex projects, it might be comfort with ambiguity and customer centricity. So what we do is we start saying, here's the stuff we do every day that we're comfortable with doing, what I call the mechanisms. Here's the behaviors that I just introduced to you in the other book. How do we get them to work together? Because there you have a real multiplier effect. Each by themselves, we've been doing this with just the mechanisms for decades and decades and decades, and they kind of work. And we see some organizations doing stuff with the behaviors, and that kind of works. But if you start stitching them together, and consciously doing this with every program you do, then you just build the strength of those a huge amount. And I have lots of clients that I've seen that demonstrate that. I mentioned this semiconductor company where every year we do this program. And we do a program around curiosity, critical thinking, and that kind of thing. And we tied it to their sales process and go-to-market strategy. So those things were reinforced with how they actually did their sales process. A client I have in Australia, Data 3, is a very strong people-oriented thing, selling, IT services and software and all that kind of thing. We took a lot of the coaching things and started implementing them of how do you better coach around deal strategies, how do you better coach around these other kinds of things, and so on and so forth. So it's you really start strengthening those when you start integrating them together and not treating them separately. And then the magic piece, there's kind of a bonus chapter in the book, is if you think about it, 70% of customer internal initiatives fail. Independent of what they're buying or anything, 70% of customer internal initiatives fail. 63% of their buying journeys end in no decision made. When you start thinking about it, they have the same behavior mechanism problem we have.
Yes, they do. Yes, they do.
So if we start thinking about how we're doing the behaviors and mechanisms within our own organization, all of a sudden we bring expertise that we can bring value into the customer and say, what are the behaviors and mechanisms you need to make this change initiative work? So you now create value in a way that nobody else is creating.
I love that. Two last questions. What would be your best advice to an executive or a leader in a business, not a manager, a leader in C-suite or board? Because for me, my frustration is that I always say, it sounds like an absolute statement. I say sales solves all problems. So as long as you're making a decent margin, you can then invest sales and pay for better R&D and innovation and strategic moats, Charlie Munger style, or, better lead generation, better marketing, better customer psychometrics, customer experience, customer journey, buyer journey, whatever it is that you want. Sales, to me, solves all problems because obviously sales is the lifeblood of any business. Why is it that maybe, and I could be being unfair here, so many leaders or executives of businesses, or very few, we agreed it was rare, this trait, this mindset, that they don't understand how crucial it is to get the sales side of the business right. Because sales is the single biggest income generating activity of any business. Yet I feel we neglect it far too much. And it's always neglected because of product, the almighty products put up on an altar, or marketing or customer service, whatever it happens to be. You and I are both biased as practitioners in sales. What's our best advice to get executives to really take sales seriously? Is it the representation or the presentation of the data, which you did with your semiconductor business? What is it? What do they have to do to get the serious?
I think the data will reinforce it, but once you have to change their beliefs and things like that, the best model to look at that is if you look at the old kind of lean manufacturing, the Six Sigma stuff ages ago. You and I are probably the only ones in your audience that remember what that was. Or if I look at things like the Toyota production system. And what all of those things did is they always started with the customer. So it's the customer who buys your stuff. So, and they buy them from a salesperson. So the salesperson is a customer of people in the organization. So if we start tracing those things back into the organization, is if I don't design and build products that our salespeople want and can sell, and they won't be able to find the customers that want that. So you just work that just the way TPS did. You start at the end and work backwards and realize that each link in this is the downstream link from you is your customer. So I look at finance and HR and operations. Their customers are other parts of the organization, including sales, marketing, customer service. If I look at product development, if I look at manufacturing, I have a client right now that's in very difficult times because their salespeople have done tremendous jobs, but they've run into manufacturing problems. They can't make the product fast enough. And now the customers are going away because they're saying, we ordered this stuff and you aren't delivering it to us. And so it's this thing is this company happened to be a very internally driven, not sales driven organization. And they didn't recognize that until they started looking at the causal links. Is the operation side weren't treating the
you said something very interesting there, and this is often a controversial statement. You didn't say it, but I'm inferring it, is that the sales team, everyone else is a customer. The sales team is a customer of the organization. And I bumbled it, but what I mean by that is everyone's job is to support sales because sales are on the front line. And if we don't make sales, we don't have a business. And sometimes when I speak to marketing people about this, as a former marketer myself, for half my career, the job of a marketer and the job of a product is to support the sales team so they can make sales and solve a particular client problem. And a lot of people really struggle with that, don't they? Because they've got their own P&L, their own fiefdom. But if we can't support sales, no one gets paid because no one makes any sales.
Well, the other thing, too, is I say who represents the customer internally to the organization? It's the salespeople. The salespeople are supposed to represent the customer interest. And the situation I just described is the salespeople are spending a lot of time with operations because the salespeople are going to say, do you realize the impact this not delivering the product is having on these customers? And so they want to make sure the customers are happy and that we're solving the problems and meeting our commitments. And also they're going back upstream into the organization. And I think a lot of, if you've grown up in sales, you always have that mindset. If you grew up someplace else, you don't necessarily have that mindset. In a lot of organizations, I see a lot of organizations that, the salespeople are basically treated as kind of
just a commodity there.
Because we know what the reputation of salespeople is, but done correctly. And I use the old TPS Toyota production system and say you just start working backwards and looking at the interdependencies and say, who is sales customers, who is sales is a customer of some other parts of the organization. Marketing, it's the customer of some other parts of the organization. Who's marketing the customer part of? So you start looking at workflows and things like that and how to work.
Well said, sir. Now, last question. This might be a hard one for you, but I know you'll be up for it. David, you've got these 8 mindsets. If you had to choose 3, and I know you're going to say it depends because you're going to be a politician, but you won't because I know you're better than that. If you had to choose 3 mindsets, I know you might have answered it, but for the listeners, what were the 3 mindsets you would focus on most, which then drive the behavior that is most successful for achieving higher and greater results in sales performance?
So I'll give you my bias, and then I'll give you another answer. So I would tend to focus on curiosity, accountability, and discipline.
Tell me why.
Because, if you're curious, if you're all 3 of those, that will drive you to the continuous learning piece. That will drive you to the customer centricity piece. That will drive you to the ability to deal with complexity. But if you don't have the curiosity, the accountability, and discipline, you'll just wander around the place. If you had just one, you'd wander all over the place. Now, people have asked me that before. They say, Dave, where do we start? And I say, start with any one of them. Because as we've just discussed, they're all tied together like this. So if you start with curiosity, you're going to be getting into continuous learning, customer centricity. You're going to be getting into accountability. You're going to be getting into discipline and all that. If you start with any of the others, you're going to be getting into all of those. So I say, don't overthink this thing. Figure out within your own team, within your organization, or within yourself, which is the one you're most interested in. Because as we've gone through this whole conversation, we've seen how
completely
they all link together.
Now, I promise.
So you'll get to
yeah, because they're so interrelated: curiosity, accountability, and discipline. My list, if I had it, would be: I love curiosity; it's a given for me, and I love how you've talked to listeners about recruiting and testing for curiosity. Really interested in that. Hunger is really important for me. Like that hunger nature, that insatiable hunger. Conscientiousness is really on right up on high on my list. Like that's the caring part, and then probably the self-awareness is huge for me as well, because I think when people can tune into themselves, they can then tune into others. David, last but not least, there's this thing that I'm pulling up on the screen now. It's page 51, dog-tiered piece of, and it says, and honestly, this was a showstopper for me. The busyness trap, okay? On page 51, team, you have to buy this book. It's the most pragmatic book I've read in a long time on sales management. You're too busy to learn. There's always another call to make, another email to send, another meeting to attend. Learning feels like a luxury you can't afford. But this thinking is backwards. Learning is the investment that makes everything else more effective. And here it is, team. David wrote this, not me. You are not too busy to learn. You're too busy because you're not learning. I mean, sir, hat tip, and I applaud you. What a beautiful statement. Maybe we could just finish there. Like, that's where did you come up with that? Because that's brilliant.
I guess, some evening with a couple glasses of wine.
It's so true. Like everyone goes, I'm too busy to learn. Well, the reason you're not learning is you haven't taken the time to learn. And I just think it's beautiful. I'm just going to read it again. You're not too busy to learn. You're too busy because you're not learning.
So let me, if you're too busy to learn, you're 100%. Never going to improve.
100%.
And see, learning is what drives that improvement. And also, if I'm trying to say, how do I go from 15% to 30% to 60%? If I'm too busy to figure that out, to learn, to change and do those things, I'm too busy to really achieve my full
And you're
potential.
only robbing yourself, your family, anything that is important to you. David, I've not.
And see, so
Wait,
that
no.
links
I'm
back,
not in a
excuse me, I know
please
we
go.
keep apologizing, but that links back to caring. if I care enough about myself to achieve my full potential, I'm not going to let those things happen to me.
I agree. And I think if you cared enough, maybe you could care about the other people you could make an impact to, your family, your friends, your church, your Rotary, your communities, whatever it is, because you make them.
And see, that's why I say caring starts with you, but it goes to your customers, your peers, your community, your family, your friends, your country.
What a beautiful place to end. Sir, David, you're a few years older than me. You're a continued learner. You epitomize a continued learner, a lifelong learner, a Peter Drucker type. I really want to say thank you so much for writing the books that you write. And I know you have a good following. Guys and girls, I reckon this is probably the best book I've read in the last few months. Is Good Enough, Good Enough by David A. Brock.
I am so humbled
because it's so
Thank you
pragmatic.
much,
It's so
Cynthia.
pragmatic and it's so easy. And it struck a chord with me because
Yeah.
I knew there's one last thing I wanted to talk to you about. The thing that just kept hitting me in the head, which is very aligned to me, is you say throughout the book, you have a choice. You have a choice, don't you? Could we finish there? Like, explain to the listeners that everything you do, you have a choice. And either you're getting better or you're getting worse.
Well, that's basically the last sentence of the book is the choice is yours. But, we have the choice. We can continue to do what we have always done, and nothing will change, or we can choose to start in one place, whether it's caring, whether it's curiosity, whether it's accountability. But if we care enough about ourselves, we choose one place and we start, and then everything keeps snowballing after that. But if we never make that choice, if we continue to just be unconscious and do what we've always done, we'll never be anything more than mediocre.
Amazing. You say the last words. You say the choice is yours. What will you choose? And I agree. So guys, get this book.
Yeah.
Great book. I'm really looking forward to getting the next book, The DNA of Sales Excellence, or DNA Sales of Excellence. David, keep up your brilliant work. Thank you so much for making time for us. I've loved this chat. You get better. Thank you for being such a professional, turning up knowing that you're a bit out of weather from all those bloody big trips you were doing across the country. And I just love your work and how practical it is. So I really, really appreciate.
Well, I'm just really humbled by your comments, and I love this discussion because you really get deep into this, and that's what I love doing.
Thank you.
So
And I think
you
we
so
do it
much.
because we care. So we'll leave it there. David, thank you, sir. You look after yourself, get better soon, and we will stay in touch with you.
Thank you.
Hey you, hope you enjoyed this episode and you learned lots from it. It takes a wee bit of work to get these wonderful, amazing guests who are leaders in their own field on our tiny little show, who share their knowledge with you freely and generously. So it makes a lot of sense for me to ask you a tiny, tiny favour in return, which is to rate, subscribe, or share the podcast, or grow this YouTube channel with your family, your friends, or colleagues, or anyone in your network that you think will benefit from listening or subscribing to it. The reason for my request is really, really simple. I'm on an absolute mission to elevate and improve the world's perception and therefore performance of rural sales reps and rural managers like yourself, which in turn helps every rural business owner or leader on the planet. I do that by doing my very best to share the most effective sales and marketing strategies with world-class leaders and thinkers so you can get the leads, respect, and sales results you deserve. But I can only do that when you help me get this channel and our podcast out to a bigger, wider audience. And the bigger the audience, the better our guests are going to be. So if you can help us with that, that would be brilliant. Now, as you know, unlike other podcasts, we don't include any of those annoying ads that interrupt your listening experience. But I would be doing you a disservice if I didn't make sure that you grab a free copy of my How to Succeed in Rural Sales ebook, which would normally cost you $20 on Amazon. You get that for free as a subscriber or a podcast listener. Or you can find out more about our rural sales team training or rural sales manager training programs. You can do all of this at our resources page, which is below the video here, which is www.ruralsalessuccess.com, where you can click on and download copies of my other books here. I have another book out last year based on Ryan Halliday's brilliant book, The Daily Stoic, and it's called 365 Rules to Master Rural Sales Success. So mastering yourself, mastering rural sales, and mastering rural sales management is kind of a 3-in-1. So make sure you get that as well. And also in the notes below here, you have an access to my free new AI training tool called Field Coach IO, which can talk to you and train you 24/7, anywhere, any time zone, no lag, no waiting, get answers that you need right there and then for the deals that you're working on. It's got all my IP inside its knowledge base, which is extensive, 13 years of IP that you're never going to access from the likes of Chat or Claude or Gemini or Grok. And you can instantly get access at a touch of a button with no waiting. You can, it will coach you or train you on your specific live sales scenario you're facing, whether it's pricing or timing objections, existing supplier, high authority, farmers that have ghosted you on quotes, the specific questions you need to ask to make those conversations count. It will even analyze your sales calls for you to put you right where you might be going wrong, as well as map out your territories. It syncs to Google Maps and Google My Maps, and process your export leads from CRM to prioritize which leads you need to follow up with the highly hyper-specific, customized, relevant follow-up you need to get those deals, those dead deals revived in your CRM. So whatever you need is going to give you immediate specific answers, and you don't need to suffer or struggle whilst you wait for answers even from me. So immediate instant coaching right there and then, just when you need it. Or even talk to you in your truck as you're about in your territory, which is awesome, as long as you've got great internet coverage. So our members in Field Coach are absolutely loving what it's doing for me. So many more use cases I could bore you with sentences here, and my development team and me are adding new tools to it all the time. So you can take Field Coach for a spin, a 15-day test drive, and try it out, see it out for yourself for just $1. The link to Field Coach is in the notes below as well. So I personally want to thank you, my friend, my dear listener and subscriber, for sharing the show with others. Really, really appreciate that, because we can make a difference. It's hard, rural sales is hard enough. Thank you for investing your time with me and my guests, because I know you're super busy. It's very busy and noisy out there. You've got many choices and options where you choose to spend and invest your very valuable, precious time. So hope it's been time well spent for you, and you've learned something from us and our guests, and it's helping you become a better rep or manager, or you as a human being. Appreciate it and appreciate you.